and people can come in as they come, but greetings to everybody, and very warm welcome on this cold, damp day in Bloemfontein. But welcome to our Early Career Researcher Colloquium, a sustainable future for African higher education post-pandemic, signifying well-being and capabilities for all. Just by way of housekeeping, and we'll have reminders through the day. If people can please keep microphones off, and cameras can be on or off as you choose, as you've got bandwidth. But if you have a question to ask, if possible, then obviously the mic and the camera preferably could go on so that we can see who's speaking. And but through the day, as presentations run, questions can be posed in the chat box, and then during the plenary Q&A sessions, hands can be raised, questions can be asked verbally or in the chat box. So without delay, I'm going to ask Professor Melanie Walker to open the proceedings. Melanie is our esteemed A1 rated professor. She holds the SARChI Chair in Higher Education and Human Development and heads up our research program. Without Melanie, none of us would be here, and nor would events such as this be possible. So we're extremely grateful to you, Melanie. Thank you so much, and over to you.
Thanks very much, Vanilla. So I have the very pleasurable job of welcoming everybody to the colloquium. I think the theme is great and very, very topical, and I personally am quite interested to see what the early career researchers are going to be talking about, because some of this is new to me, this sort of orientation to a post-pandemic world. The program is structured to allow plenty of time for papers so that it's not a great rush through everything. So well done. Congratulations to the postdocs who were behind the organizing and the decisions, and especially to Fenella, who I think held it all together and pulled it all together, and also to Lucretia Smith for providing much needed admin support. I also want to extend a very warm welcome indeed to Dr. Emmanuel Ojo, who works at the University of the Witwatersrand, and who will present our keynote address. We're really looking so forward to this, and I'm sure it's going to be tremendous and very, very interesting. That's all I'm going to say. I've asked Fenella just to post a slide. If there's anybody who wants to find out more about the work of the research group, please do visit our web pages. You'll find out about everybody who's attached to our group.
Can you see the slide? Melanie, you've gone mute.
The mic is on mute, Melanie.
What happened? Did I go muted? Sorry. Yeah, and to just say, I've asked for a slide to go up, just showing the link to the web pages of the group. So if anybody's interested in exploring the group, there's really interesting early career research work going on, lots of interesting projects. Do have a look. If you're interested in these ideas around human development and capabilitarian scholarship, do check out the website of the HDCA and also the journal. And just a reminder that our annual conference will be held in September in Antwerp with some online days. So for those of you who can't actually get there, you might be interested just in registering for the online days. Some of the program is really excellent and the fees very, very low. So do think about that. Enjoy the day. I hope you find lots of interest, lots of good ideas, and I'm certainly looking very, very forward to it. So I'm going to hand over now to Tiffany.
Thank you very much, Professor Walker, and thanks, Fenella. Welcome you all to this today's event. My humble duty this morning is to chair this session as well as introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Emmanuel Ojo. And so Dr. Emmanuel Ojo is the acting deputy head of school, postgraduate studies at the University of the Witwatersrand. and he's also the chair of Transformation, Internationalization and Partnership in the Faculty of Humanities at the University of the Witwatersrand. Between July and August of 2019, Dr. Ojo served as an international visiting fellow at the Department of Education at the University of Oxford in the UK. He is a principal investigator of the global research project involving 25 universities across 5 continents, where they're investigating the impact of the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, on global higher education. He also undertakes research in higher education, sustainability, and interdisciplinary research. And he serves as editor of the Journal of Higher Education in Africa and Journal of Human Behavior and Social Environment. And so it is my pleasure and a privilege to introduce and welcome Dr. Ojo to present his keynote presentation this morning. And let me also just inform you and let you know that Dr. Ojo was one of my supervisors, and so I cherish the wisdom that he has, and I hope and I believe that you also be inspired by this morning's presentation. And so, Dr. Ojo, I'll hand over to you, and you have 55 minutes for your presentation. I'll give you a heads up when it's 5 minutes to the end of the presentation. So I'll either interject by reminding you that you have 5 minutes, or you're going to hear the alarm. I don't know if I'll try to make it a bit louder just to signal you that you have 5 minutes to go. And so welcome, and it's your time, Dr. Ojo. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Banda. I know you don't like me calling you Dr. Banda, but today I have the liberty to call you Dr. Banda, and I will do it over and over. So colleagues, ECRs, students, it's a great privilege for me to be able to do this. Tiffany has actually given you a sense of where I am, and I'm really very happy that I can do this. And I'm really grateful to Professor Walker and the entire team at the SARChI-HEHD. It's such a privilege to be able to do this, and I hope within the next few minutes, I will be able to convince you about the kind of work I'm doing and the kind of insight from that work. And so this session has 3 parts. So the keynote has 3 parts. I'll start with the current realities around global higher education, and I will then talk about this global study itself. What exactly is a global study about? How did we come about it? What has been the associated publications about the global study? And then the third part, which I find, when I was putting together my thoughts in terms of presenting these, I felt I'll be doing a disservice if I don't share some valuable thoughts and advice with early career researchers, because I know quite a number of us will be early career researchers. Please, as the chair said, this is not just I really don't like this being a lecture. It's more or less a conversation. I'm working on about 3 screens, and I can see what exactly is on the chart. So I will keep note of that. And at some point, I have an interactive session where I will be able to get real-time responses from you. And please feel free to leave your comments in the meeting chat. And at the end of this session, in real time, you will be able to download this presentation to your phone, to your computer, or any device you're actually using to view this. So this is exactly where I want to start. I want to find out what exactly is your perspective about the influence of the pandemic on global higher education. So I will run a Slido session. It's a very quick one. What I want you to be able to do for me is to scan the QR code, and in real time, I'll be able to get feedback from you in terms of what you think about these 5 short questions. So the first question is asking, what exactly is your assessment of the current pandemic and its impact on universities globally? So if you scan the QR code, and I will also in the chat, I will drop the link for you to complete this in case you can't scan the QR code. So the link I've just dropped now is the link. If you click on that link, you'll be able to go straight to this Slido session. There are just 5 quick questions. Okay, one person has, responded. 2, everybody, 2 so far says high, that the impact is high. Okay, 3 says high. Interesting, thank you. I'm getting the result in real time. Thank you so very. 5 said is high. Okay, 6 high. Interesting. 8 high still. Okay, thank you. Okay, 10 said high. Interesting, thank you. Okay, at least we're getting responses that people are also saying is a medium, but most people are saying it's high. The impact is high. Please, the good thing about Slido is that I don't know who you are, but I can get the response in real time as an aggregated data. 16 more people are saying is high. Thank you. This is really very helpful. There are about 35 of us here. At least if I could get a response up to about 20 people responding, I would really be thankful. Okay. 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 Happy? So depending on how you've answered the previous question, how will you assess the impact? Do you think the impact is positive, negative, or you're not really sure? What do you think? Okay. One person said the impact is negative. Okay. Someone said, I'm not sure. Okay. At least 2 persons have said they are not sure. Okay. There is one response at least saying it's positive. Thank you. Okay. This is looking interesting. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. 10 responses. Equal weighting, unsure and negative. Okay, positive is growing, negative is gradually reducing. Okay, interesting. Thank you. It's nice to know exactly what we think in real time. Okay, interestingly now people are saying they are unsure, and gradually responses that is positive is growing. Interesting. So thank you. This is good. Thank you very much. Very good. Happy? So 17 responses so far. This is very good. So I will switch to the next question now. So can you forecast a time frame for eliminating this pandemic? What do you think? What is a time frame? Can you guess? Okay. Okay. Someone said, at least someone said it's greater than 5 years. It would take greater than 5 years to eliminate it. More people are saying totally unknown. Okay. It's interesting. Thank you. 15 responses so far. Most of you are saying no, it's totally unknown. Thank you. This is interesting. 16, nice response. Thank you very much. Next one. So, as universities, do you think we should resume our pre-pandemic practices and routines once we have the pandemic under control? What do you think? Okay, I see a yes. I see another. Okay, this is good. So this is asking you, do you think we should go to pre-pandemic era? Okay. Thank you. 12 responses so far. At least one person said he or she is indifferent, which is good. In real time. Q. Awesome. 17 responses, good. 18, thank you. And this is the last question. What sentence best describe you as a participant in this colloquium? Who are you? These options are deliberate, very, very deliberate. Okay. Okay, 17 responses. Thank you so very much. So in this same Slido session, you will be able to add questions in real time. You can leave your comments, you can leave your questions there, and I will take that up at the end of the presentation so that we can engage with your questions. So I'm sincerely thankful for completing the Slido session. Really grateful for your participation. So I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint and speak to my thoughts about the topic. So the first part is looking at the global realities with respect to global education. And I'll take you through a journey to start with. And this is a journey that I want us to reflect on even as I do this presentation. Because even as researchers, we need to understand that these global realities impact all of us, either we accept it or not. So this was the data as of January 23rd, 2020. This was the number of the infections globally. It was under 45,000. By the same year, in October, it has jumped to 36 million infections. And the death globally has increased from what it was, about 1,000, in 1 year to more than 1 million. Okay? And by July 2021, the number of cases have jumped to 190 million and the number of deaths, 4 million. In October 2021, vaccines have become available, and that's why you see the green number. But observe the number of deaths and the number of infections. This is less than a year ago. As of this morning, I tracked the same data, and the infections has gone more than 500 million infections. As of today, the vaccines administered globally is about 11 billion vaccines. And the total death globally is over 6 million. So if you look at this context, this is not something we can take for granted. This is the first time in our lifetime that we will experience such a pandemic of global scale. And you've seen how the variants have come and gone, Alpha, Gamma, Beta. Delta did a lot of the devastation in South Africa. And now we have Omicron, as declared by the World Health Organization. And this was published on the 18th, which is 2 days ago, and it came out actually first thing yesterday morning. And there is a confirmation that South Africa has actually entered a new phase of the COVID pandemic. And these are its implications on us all. So as researchers in South Africa, as researchers on the continent, and as researchers interested in conducting quality studies in our different fields, either we accept it or not, the pandemic still has impact on our work, and we cannot take that for granted. So That is the first part of the presentation. So I'm actually setting the ground for us to understand that the pandemic has impact. So in this second part, I will now speak to the global research study. I will present the context of it, and I'll give you key insights in terms of the research so far. I think, let me just pause here and tell you a quick story. In December 2019, I was actually in Italy. I was in Europe for 3 weeks, and precisely in Italy. And I was just roaming the street. I mean, I was doing my work, moving from one point to another, and I was basically traveling between 2 cities in Italy. I used the public transport system, I did everything, and after that I flew back to South Africa. Because I think it is important to give you a sense of my passion about researching pandemics higher education. I flew back to my family. I didn't know exactly that there was already a pandemic in Europe. I flew back to my wife and children and resumed life normally. And I remember that because I teach research design for master's and PhD at the School of Education, I remember coming back and we had a couple of sessions, and I think we had about, a few sessions, and then there was a session specifically I wanted to invite some international researchers, and we had it online. By February, I knew something was really, really big happening. I mean, I was just convinced. By the time we were locked down, I realized that, gee, I missed that. And that became the consciousness I have about contributing to knowledge in this area as a researcher. I mean, I have to be socially responsible because the research we do must have impact. And that is exactly just giving you a sense of the passion I have. I'm leading this and actually initiating this and leading this over the years. So back to my presentation. So, pandemic happened. We started wearing masks. Initially, we were locked down. We started with the emergency remote teaching and learning. By April 2020, we were locked in. For the first time in my entire life, in my entire career as an academic, I was locked in my house and I can't move out. And I still have to work, I still have to teach, I still have to write, I still have to supervise. I still have to produce as a researcher. And honestly, that was big. And, you know, from the reference I've actually shared on the screen, higher education is really very vital to the 21st century knowledge economy. And with the world changing, especially because of the pandemic, so is higher education. And it is important for us to understand what exactly is, what I've actually now framed pandemics higher education research. So there were 2 questions that I came up with, and I'll give you more sense of exactly, how this evolved. And those 2 questions are exactly what you see on the screen. Because, I mean, if higher education is really pivotal in the 21st century in terms of what we do in the global knowledge economy, you definitely have to understand that university students, because they are in transition between the world of schooling or the world of higher education into the world of work, we must understand precisely how this pandemic is impacting on them. So these are the 2 questions I asked, and those 2 questions actually foregrounded, exploring what exactly the impact of the pandemic is on global universities. So through that lockdown, when everybody was panicking about what exactly is happening around the world, I was taking deep breath on a daily basis. And I was reading and researching. I decided, and one of my very close colleagues at the University of Cambridge, I will tell you about him. I called him up and I said, Tony, these are the questions I have. And I'm really very concerned that we cannot miss this opportunity to do good work. And then he said, no, Emmanuel, these questions are very fascinating. And then we came up with a plan, and that's exactly what we did. And currently there are 25 universities and growing involved in the project. The paper with the colleagues at the university, in one of the universities in New York, in the United States, was actually published last week. So currently there are 25 universities across 5 continents. The first study was done at VET between April and August 2020. I got the first study. I mean, in that time, without leaving this house, I was able to administer questionnaires after getting the ethics clearance, and 4,434 students and 235 academics actually completed the questionnaire. And as of the 20th of May, the questionnaire actually went live, and it was open till about the 8th of June 2020. And it went through the office of the Deputy Registrar at the university. And there are 3 sections of the questionnaire. The first look at the demographic data, and then the B part actually look at the perception of students in terms of their readiness and motivation for online teaching, learning, and assessment. The C part, which is the third part, were actually open-ended questions looking at what exactly are their personal challenges, and especially what could hinder their ability to successfully learn online. And what exactly was interesting about this was through that first data set that was collected at Bates University, this paper was published. I don't know if this face or name is familiar to you. Professor Tony Onyebuze is a professor at the University of Cambridge. Is an A-rated NRF researcher, and he is very passionate about doing research on the continent, and is the one I'm co-leading this project together with. And this paper was actually published in September precisely 2020. And on the basis of this paper, we have actually done some few things I will tell you about. But in terms of the research approach, so what we decided to do was to use a multi-mixed methods research approach, and it's also a meta-method study. So what exactly is interesting about this is how we integrated multiple methods research approaches and then mixed methods research approaches, and I will explain a bit about that. So the theoretical philosophy that we used was critical dialectical pluralist stance, basically making the assumption that at a macro level, social injustices are ingrained in every society. And this was really very useful in terms of what exactly we did. I mean, as a concept, as a theoretical lens. So in terms of the mixed method research, what we did was, first of all, to administer the questionnaires we did, and then in the questionnaire there were qualitative questions and there were also quantitative questions. In the second stage, we look at the data collected, and then we did the analysis simultaneously. And in the third phase, we gave equal weight to both the quantitative and the qualitative phases in terms of the research design. So for this particular presentation, I will share with you data or insight from 3 universities across the world. So there were 2 universities in South Africa, and there is 1 university in the United States. And for the South African part, within the 2 universities, which are actually 2 research-intensive universities, the sample size was precisely 6,417 university students, and in New York, in the private university in New York, we had a sample size of 254 university students. What is very, very interesting about this research is that, you know, the collaborators are from different disciplines. There is a medical doctor amongst us, there is a nurse, there is a psychologist. There are people from engineering, there are people doing pure sciences, you know. And, you know, what is interesting about the global project is, I mean, we have at least about 3 international languages. I mean, one of the paper I published was actually translated to Spanish and Portuguese, because we work with colleagues in Chile, in Brazil, you know, and in South America, and the list keeps growing. So it's really very rich. But for this particular research, for this particular presentation, I will speak to the 3 universities, 2 in South Africa and 1 in the United States. So to start with, we had 7 themes. I mean, and prominently, I want to flag about 2 or 3 of these 7 themes. The first one is the dimension of mental health. And the other dimension is those personal challenges actually, you know, students, I mean, have, because it's still ongoing, and including some of the dimensions within families. And let me just let me just stop here and just tell you, just give you a sense of what is happening. I mean, the study, even though we have all these partners, you know, happening, I mean, working concurrently with at the same time, I was with the colleagues in New York till 3:30, actually 3:45 a.m. this morning, because we've added an extra layer to the data collection phase, which is basically conducting focus group discussions. And I must tell you, issues around mental health is huge. I mean, initially when it came out, we thought it was just something that would sit in one sample size, and, you know, maybe it will not be replicated in the other sample sizes. But believe me, I mean, the focus group discussion, I mean, that I conducted till about 3:45 a.m. this morning, New York, I mean, my time in South Africa and New York time, about a little before 8 p.m. It is very clear that issues around mental health is not something that we must overlook. And I think we need to, and I think we really need to pay attention to this. And thanks, yes, thank you very much for this link. I see that link in the chat. Fantastic one. So it's something that, oh, thank you very much. That's one of the papers. Yes, thank you so very much. Yeah, thank you, Fenella. Yeah, thank you so very much. So what you will find, and I'm saying this specifically because, you know, we are still in a pandemic context, and we need to acknowledge that being in pandemic context is not something we must take for granted. A lot is still happening. And I'm not just speaking to you as just a researcher. I wear multiple hats, you know. I'm also an administrator currently. And some of the issues I've actually had to engage with since this pandemic started, I mean, they're huge, not just on students, but even on academics. And it's something I really want to flag very strongly about this research. So we did topic modeling, and I don't want to really go into this, but I just want you to observe the bubble that are actually quite prominent on this particular slide. There is time, there is data, there is work, there is home, you know, and there is person, there is the environment, and this is something that, you know, I mean, if you go into the publications and you dig deeper, you will see exactly what I'm saying. So this part is about self-directed learning. And one of the things that we picked up was that students with lower degrees of online learning self-management were more likely to be undergraduates and full-time students. And these actually compared with some of the other studies that were conducted within the same time, you know, around the impact of the pandemic on global education. And yes, mental health. And you know, what is really interesting about the mental health dimension is that it also has a gender dimension. And that gender dimension is something that I find extremely very powerful. Very, very powerful. Within this data, we picked up a very strong hit on gender-based violence. I won't go into it, but you can see that there is a lot that we can really unpack. We are gradually unpacking some of the quantitative data, you know, with you know, deeper semi-structured interview and focus group discussion. And some of the things we're picking up already is quite interesting, but I just needed to pay attention to the gender dimension of mental health. It's something that really I think we need to pay attention. The other thing I want us to pay attention to is the age group. The age group 18 to 24 years old is actually a very sensitive age group. I won't want to go much into details because of the time I have, but it's something that we really need to pay attention to. Same group is with undergraduate students. Undergraduate students are more prone, you know, to issues around mental health. And that is not to say postgraduate students are not, but I mean, this is just looking exactly at the data that we got. And then full-time students as well, they struggle a lot. They struggle a lot. And as I said, we're unpacking the data at a deeper level, at an in-depth level through qualitative, you know, data collection strategies, including focus group discussion and semi-structured interviews. And some of the things coming up are quite interesting. So this, we publish this, we publish the data set, you know, the insight from the data set from one of the universities in the conversations. This was published on the 5th of May, 2021. It went live on the 5th of May, 2021. And within an hour, this actually went off. This actually went online. My phone went crazy. I mean, this is the readership now, so I can give you a sense of the readership. So we have about 21,000, you know, readers across the world and in different parts of the world. And you can see how many people from South Africa actually read this. But what is interesting about this particular article in the conversation was how it generated a big media interest. Within that same week, Talk 702 FM called me for an interview. Within the same week, I got interviewed again by one of the radio stations in Cape Town. I've had to do live webinars. This one was in March with St. John's University in the United States, in New York. I've had to speak in live sessions at Stellenbosch University. This was on the 5th of April. And we've also used social media platform to disseminate the insights. I mean, I use Twitter a lot, as well as ResearchGate, as well as Google Scholar. And these are some of the publications so far from the global study. We have quite a number in the pipeline. And, you know, when Professor Walker was talking about that journal, I'm already thinking we might have to put in a publication in that journal as a way of also enriching the journal in terms of the kind of issues it deals with. Because I mean, this is also about human development, and we cannot pretend this is not important. So now what? So this is the third part of my presentation. I am fully aware that I'm talking to early career researchers. And even though the data earlier, gave a sense of precisely the people in the, I see, Anesu, I see your question. Is the higher prevalence of mental health challenges among undergraduate and full-time students a consequence of failure, a failure to adopt? Okay, if so, what are the implications? Okay, nice, thank you. I will come back there. Thank you, Anesu. Fantastic question. Thanks so very much. Grateful, very grateful. So I'm conscious I'm speaking to early career researchers, and I feel very strongly that I will be doing a disservice to myself to start with, because I'm really very passionate about early career researchers. And I've actually been responsible for early career researchers at the School of Education now for about 8 years, including now. I'm really very passionate about them. And I've even written and published and led a project looking at the future of African researchers, funded by the German Research Foundation, for 4 countries in Southern Africa: Mauritius, South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Mozambique. So I'm really very passionate about early career researchers. So I thought to myself, I can't just talk about this global research without, sharing my thoughts with the early career researchers in the house. Because I've got a lot of passion for early career researchers, because we're all lifelong learners. So I'm saying I'm going to make a case for early career researchers in South African universities, and you can see the evolution of the intellectual freedom from this cartoon. I like the PhD comics. So I mean, before grad school, and then you research in peace when you pass the emeritus professor. So this is wishing you all, first of all, long life. I hope you'll be able to research in peace, as it shows on the screen. In old age, you'd have, get good, good impact on the society. Yeah. So age is not an indicator of early career researchers. So age is not an indicator. And being an early career is an emergent phase of one's career. It is a path, is not a destination. And you walk this path once, and it is important that I will also share with you some of the wisdom nuggets that I feel very strongly to enable you to at least grow through this phase. Bezali, 2003, and this is a seminar work, and the reason, even though it's dated, is a seminar work, and I like how the author has actually looked at the whole notion of early career researchers, because it's about research development, more importantly, and I will really want to foreground my advice around actually developing a stable research profile. For me, that's really very key. So, and I acknowledge that being an early career researcher could be very challenging. It's the pathway is filled with kind of difficulty. There are uncertainties. You're not really sure. Okay, am I going to finish this PhD? Am I going to finish this master's? Okay, when I finish, why will I get a job? Okay, I want to do a postdoc. Will I even get into that postdoc? Oh, will I be able to meet up the deliverables of the postdoc? And those are some of the kind of, those are the kind of, contentions you have with yourself from time to time. So according to this literature, the early career researchers is a very vulnerable group, and I feel very strongly that I need to offer some advice, if you don't mind. And it's an important pipeline to the professorate. But DED 2015 has argued that in South Africa, we have an aging academic staff, and it is important for us to explore the enormous opportunities, especially we have now with early career researchers. So I have 7 ideas to share with you. And this is me, you know. These are just wisdom nuggets I want to speak to you, you know. I'm making the argument that as an early career researcher, you're very critical to the growth of a sustainable future for higher education in not just in South Africa, but actually on the continent and globally. So the first thing I would want to advise, if you permit me, is that please think, read, and write critically. Never, ever, especially if you want a career in academia, don't stop publishing. Do quality research. The second advice I will give is the importance of having a long-term professional strategy and decide very early on the kind of research questions that actually interest you. Don't do research because it was forced on you. Do something you're very passionate about and you can connect to Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, because those SDGs, the 17 SDGs, actually speak a lot about what are the aspirations of the world. The third advice I will give is the importance of building good relationships. Look for good collaborations. Don't wait till when you finish your master's, don't wait till when you finish your PhD, or don't wait even till when you finish your postdoc. Develop good ties and focus on these good ties such that you can collaborate and work with these good ties or with these good partners, with these good collaborators to write peer-reviewed publications. The fourth advice I will give is don't think in silo disciplines. You know, one of the arguments I've made over and over is that the problems of the world were not created at the level of the disciplines. And if you did not create those problems at the level of the disciplines, it would be totally impossible for you to solve those problems at the level of the disciplines. You need to collaborate. We need to share knowledge. We need to work collaboratively. We need to partner. The fifth advice I will share with you, and I showed you how I've also used social media to communicate research. Use social media. Just 2 weeks ago, I was in Kenya, actually speaking to researchers across the continent, more or less also early career academics, early career researchers. And I was actually teaching them on how to use social media to communicate very good public briefs, policy briefs. And I share with you quite a lot of strategies on how to use social media in a very neat, non-problematic way. The sixth advice I want to give is what I call the wheel of life. Balance that wheel of life. Don't just look at your life as being an academic or being a researcher in silos. Think of how the wheel of life leads to your mental health. Slow down. Goal set. Make those connections in terms of the wheel of life. The last advice I want to give is the importance of believing in yourself. Believe in yourself, please. Believe in yourself. If you are in this forum, it is because you were found valuable to be sent this invite to join this colloquium. Please believe in yourself, believe in yourself, believe in yourself. So, this is my conclusion. Everything I've said so far is to argue that the global higher education landscape will never be the same. Either we acknowledge it or not, it's never going to be the same. And I personally believe We will continue to have a growing interest in pandemic higher education research because the universities of the future will not be the kind of universities we have now. Interdisciplinary research, mixed method research are useful tools for this kind of research. For us to be able to improve policy and practice, it is important that we work together as stakeholders, to enable our students differently, to enable the different institutions, including the administrators at the institutions, to adapt to these changes. And it is only by doing this that we'll be able to truly have a sustainable future for African higher education and global higher education. So, my sincere appreciation to Professor Walker. I mean, I've seen your work, I've read some of your work. Believe me, this is an exceptional woman. This is an intellectual legend and truly an A-rated researcher. I really appreciate you for the good work you're doing at the University of Free State, especially in your role as a SARChI chair for higher education and human development research program. I'm actually looking forward to the opportunity to co-create a project with you at some point to draw on each other's kind of experience and the possibilities in our institutions. So all the postdoctoral fellows, research fellows within the center, within the SARChI chair that made this happen, I'm saying thank you so very much for making this happen. Thanks to all the administrators who also make this colloquium possible. And to you, Dr. Banda, Tiffany Banda, thank you for what you have done. And to you, participants, I mean, thanks for your participation because, without you being here, we won't have this colloquium. It's impossible to come and just sit in front of the screen and speak to an empty screen. There are people on the other side of the screen, and this is exactly what makes it very, very powerful. So thank you so very much for making the time, for finding the time, valuable time to join this session. Really very happy, really very thankful. In real time, if you scan the QR code, you can download this presentation. In real time, you can download it. I will drop the link in the chat so that you can download it and consult the references that I've actually shared with you. I've also dropped the link in the chat. Colleagues, thank you for this opportunity. And I've decided to finish 8 minutes earlier deliberately so that we can have more time for a conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ojo, for the presentation. It's quite deep, and I'm sure we've all drawn some tenets from it. And thank you that I didn't have to use my alarm because I was trying to raise the volume, it couldn't work, so you just saved me from that. And so we have a number of questions in the chat section, but before we go to the questions, I think I would just invite Dr. Mikateko Matebula, who is the discussant, to give her thoughts. And if there are any questions that she has, she'll also pose those questions. Then we'll go to the questions that are in the chat. So over to you, Dr. Matebula.
Thanks, Tiffany. And thank you, Dr. Ojo, for a very engaging presentation that I think was, encouraging all of us to think and reflect on where we are in terms of the pandemic. You started off by talking about the current realities and the impact of the pandemic on higher education globally. And I think in different ways, you reminded us of the scale and the prevalence, the ongoing prevalence of the pandemic, rightfully saying that we often take it for granted. And I think as we kind of slowly move back to some form of normal in various ways, for example, through more and more face-to-face engagements or going to conferences in person, it can kind of feel like the pandemic is going away. But as you reminded us, we shouldn't be taking that for granted. In terms of not taking it for granted, I'm wondering how you kind of integrate or respond to the idea of not taking it for granted, and how it speaks to your research and influences the kind of research questions that you've been asking, and that you also plan to ask in the future. And in terms of the key insights that you gave us about the study that you're working on, I liked how, you know, the research questions that you came up with were centered on students' experiences in terms of their preparedness for online learning, as well as their attitudes. And I was wondering to what extent you also got some information or empirical research on what universities are actually how they're continuing to kind of respond and be prepared for these types of challenges. Because although the pandemic is unique in its impact on higher education, there will obviously be challenges in the future that require universities to be agile and to pivot and to keep on responding to these challenges in ways that still facilitate meaningful teaching and learning, as well as assessments and productivity and so on. I wondered if you could say more about the theoretical framework that you mentioned. I only jotted down the critical dialectic, but I was a little bit slow, so I didn't catch the rest of it. And I think as people who work with the capabilities approach in human development, we sometimes neglect thinking about other theoretical perspectives, other theoretical frameworks that might be informative. So if you could say more about that and how it's influenced your thinking. I found it quite interesting when you talked about the fact that young women are particularly most vulnerable to issues around mental health. If you could perhaps say a little bit more about that, whether it's in terms of how exactly this manifested in the data, or if there are responses from universities in terms of how they're dealing with mental health in order to facilitate better well-being for students. And then in terms of the future of African research and researchers, what's your take on how Africa and how African researchers are responding to topical issues, to issues related to the pandemic, but then also to topics like transformation and decolonization? So where, in your view, do African researchers and African research stand in that landscape? And I also wondered if you could say more about the future of the collaboration that African researchers have with international collaborators. So you talked a lot about multidisciplinarity, how you're collaborating with overseas and internationally based researchers. But I wondered about things like the types, the nature of the partnerships, the relationships, the inequalities that are sometimes manifest in these relationships, particularly because at times it's attractive for people to work with African researchers, but often the selection or the decision to work with us is quite instrumental in terms of funders requiring researchers to kind of collaborate with African-based researchers. So just issues around the equality of the partnerships and the nature of the partnerships there. And then towards the end, I really appreciate the advice that you were giving to early career researchers, and also how you kind of talked about how fuzzy the definition can be. So some of us might feel established, but actually we're still emerging, and perhaps this emergent stage actually goes on for longer than what we sometimes think. In terms of the advice that you gave from me, I was particularly interested in what you said about public engagement, using various platforms to get the data out there so that we're not preaching to the choir. And I think we often do this in academia. We focus on, the publications that count in inverted commas, and then we neglect kind of making sure that what we do and the findings are actually communicated to wider audiences in order to enable greater impact and dialogue with policymakers and so on. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Thank you very much for an engaging presentation. And I'll leave it to you now to respond before we move on to asking you to respond to the questions in the chat. Thank you very much.
Hey, Mikateko, you're very brave. That's a mouthful. Thank you so very much. You said so much. So let me start with the last comment or question around social media and research dissemination. You know, what I found very powerful, especially because of the access we have in terms of technology now, is how news, either fake or good news, can travel at the speed of light. And as researchers, one of the things I come to realize is that we are too conservative to speak about the good work we do. And personally, and I've actually trained researchers about this, how to use social media to communicate research. I mean, that was what I was doing in Kenya 2 weeks ago for the whole week. And there are very powerful ways to do it. And you can attract a lot of people interested in your research to collaborate with you. And I will link that to what you asked about the future of collaborations. You spoke about local versus global, the nature of the collaboration and the inequalities. As I said, you know, when the pandemic started, I knew I had agency. And that was exactly what I used. And that's the reason why the first thing I said was that it is important as early career researchers to consistently think and write. Because, and because that is exactly what we all do as academics. We are consistently reading, we're thinking, we're writing. And when you look at future global collaborations linked to the nature of it, linked to inequalities you've mentioned, linked to the issue of social media, linked to the issue of research dissemination, I personally believe at the heart of all these interactions is asking good questions. The quality of the questions you ask will determine the breadth and how deep you can grow in terms of these different spaces. So that's exactly what I'll really answer that. And it is actually important that we ask good questions. I spend time, a lot of time, to think about the questions, reflect about the questions, reflect about what exactly the literature is saying about the questions. And that is exactly the way I work. And for people who know me, I'm always thinking, I'm always writing, I'm always reading. I'm always doing. I mean, as I told you, I mean, I'm here, but I only finished the last meeting at 3:45 a.m. this morning because I was working with colleagues on the, and I mean, even though it was late, I mean, I was really having a nice time because of the value of the questions and, and the questions. So that's how I will respond to that. And the issue around mental health, you connected the issue of mental health with gender. Believe me, it's a very emotive topic, and it came out very strongly during the lockdown. As I said, issues around gender-based violence became very prominent. A lot of students struggled. In one of the data sets, there were students who alluded to them having suicidal thoughts, which was actually very scary. And part of what we did was to notify the university about this, even though we could not identify who these students are. And I know at least 2 universities in South Africa. As soon as that conversation article came out, I knew they took a different position in supporting students in terms of mental health issues. So in terms of the theoretical framework, the framework is about, okay, let's talk about the use of theory. Theory is about lenses, And I am of the opinion, very strong opinion, that for us to really understand our world, we'll need multiple lenses. You can't use one lens. I can't, if I give you my glasses now, I can assure you it won't work for you. If I give this to my son will say, Dad, what's this? Nah, I don't need this. And that is actually the reality in our world. We live in a world of multiple realities, and the reason why we need to use multiple lenses. And the research philosophy is about the assumption that at a macro level, social injustices are ingrained in every society. And I mean, I've dropped a link to the reference. I mean, you can read the paper itself. It's a very rich paper, and I will encourage you to read it because it's about critical dialectical pluralism. It's about seeing the world, in different spaces. Yes, I've made a strong argument that we cannot take for granted that we are still in a pandemic. We can't take it. I mean, we just cannot assume the pandemic is gone. And my take, especially as universities, is that the pandemic has changed what exactly the future of work is already. One of our professors was asking me to talk to one of the children who has just finished her PhD, and the dad is like, "Oh, she's published, she did it," and the dad was like, she should go into the world of academia. And she said, "No, I'm not. I'm not interested. Yes, I've published it. I've done this, I've done, but that is not what I want." So I asked her, "What do you want?" And she told me, and as she was telling me, I mean, we had a face-to-face meeting, and she was telling me, I was reading quite extensively about what exactly she wanted to do, and I found it fascinating. And even though she has a PhD in pharmaceutical sciences, she told me she wants to be a medical writer. And I said, "Oh, really?" And I checked and I started reading, and oh, wow. And within 2 weeks to our discussion, she got a job with an American company. She lives in Pretoria with her parents. She got a job with an American company who has now employed her to work with them in the US. And they are paying her as if she's physically living in the US. That is the new world of work in which we live. So the key question is, will it be the same kind of skill set that we used to teach pre-pandemic that you think we'll be able to teach the students now for them to be able to work in that kind of work? No. So we need to look at our curriculum. We need to look at how we teach that curriculum. We need to look at how that curriculum actually linked back to the world of work. And it is only by consistently having these conversations and consistently rethinking, learning, unlearning and learning and relearning, learning, unlearning, relearning, even as institutions, that we can actually evolve to be universities of the future. Because the 21st century, a lot is happening now that we are not really paying attention to. I mean, I love reading, and I love finding out things. And there are a couple of institutions that I follow, and I follow them quite aggressively over time. Believe me, a lot is happening. So for us as South African universities, for us as universities on the continent, and universities globally, we need to think about what we are doing now as it connects to the future. And the future we're talking about is the next minute. This is actually the next minute. As I speak with you, a lot of the jobs we're actually training students for now, they're disappearing. A lot is happening. I use AI to do some things that will surprise you. I've engaged quite a lot with AI in terms of using AI for research. It's fascinating, the kind of thing that is actually possible. Mikateko, I don't know if, I know I tried, at least, but I think because I was making notes that you were actually asking the questions, I think I answered about 85% of your questions. I think
Which is more than good enough. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so very much.
Tiffany, do we now move on to the Q&A session for us to kind of look at the questions in the chat?
Sure.
All right. So Dr. Ojo, there are a number of questions in the chat. The first one was coming from Manesu. If you recall, he asked if the higher prevalence of mental health challenges amongst undergraduate students and full-time students was a consequence of a failure to adopt to remote learning or not? And if so, what are the implications for distance universities like UNISA, where the remote teaching and learning is standard procedure?
Thanks, Mikateko, and thanks, Anesu, for this question. I really love the question. And let me just say this. Our homes are not designed for us to learn. Our homes are designed for us to cook, eat with friends and family, and sleep. When the pandemic happened, most people were forced into one room. Because remember, most of our students are of color, and they will come from their different lungus, and they come to the city for university life. When they're at rest, they have flexibility to engage with friends, with peers, with colleagues, with other academics, and they can go to the library. And keep in mind that it's also internet access on campus. So when the pandemic happened, it was like being in prison. Now, this is home you've actually escaped from, and now you are locked in at home in one room. And I remember reading some of the questions, some of the responses from the students to say, we live in a 2-bedroom apartment. My dad is also trying to, and it's all kinds of. So the high prevalence of mental health and NESU is not because they were not ready to adopt, or they were not ready to adapt. They were not ready to adapt to remote teaching, to remote learning. It was because of the home context, the home environment is actually not suitable to do that. And that is what a pandemic does. So in this instance, we really cannot compare what exactly has happened with the emergency remote teaching and learning with what exactly, UNISA has a solid system that they use. And we must give credit to them because they're a distance learning institution. So I will put them apart and say, no, UNISA will continue to improve. They have a system that has worked over time. And the mental health situation around undergraduates, around full-time students, around issues around gender, is as a result of the home situation. Our homes are not built for it. It would be luxury for you to have a home office before the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ojo. The next question is from Fenella, and it's related to this. And she's asking what strategies should or could universities be putting in place to address the student mental health crisis or issues arising from the pandemic? So what could universities be doing, and what should they be doing to respond to this problem?
We need to demystify mental health. We need to create an awareness that when you talk about mental health, it's not something to be ashamed of. And mental health comes in different dimensions. Stress is a form of mental health. Anxiety is a form of mental health. Overthinking is a form of mental health. Inability to sleep could be as a result of mental health. So we first of all need to demystify these issues around mental health. It's nothing for us to be ashamed of that we cannot seek help for. So the first thing is, let's create an awareness that mental health is a common human problem. Because I was conducting the focus group conversation and discussion with students in New York last week, including even this morning, and one of the students said, I cannot tell Even in the US, how can I tell my parents that I have mental health issues? Is it mad? He said that my dad would say, "What do you mean mental health? Go and take a walk. Go and sleep. It will get rid of the mental health." So let's create an awareness that this thing is real, and also let's not be dismissive of it. Because when we are dismissive of it, people won't also seek the right intervention. So that is my answer for that. And universities are already doing a lot to create awareness. Our university is doing so much to create awareness and to put out interventions for students to say, you can talk about it. One thing our supervisors will do, and I mean, I was still talking about this yesterday, is that, as a postgraduate supervisor especially, there's an intersectionality between you being a tutor, a mentor, and a coach. And to a very large extent, you are more or less shape shifting in those three spaces. You're like tutor today, tomorrow you're actually a mentor, next tomorrow you're a coach, and you're trying to find a balance to help these students, because students struggle. And so do academics, they also struggle. So Fenella, I don't know if that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ojo. We've got another question here that kind of takes us back to how you started the presentation and the poll that you were asking us to take. So non-Duduzo asks which organization or website you use to generate your statistics.
I didn't use any institution, I didn't use any organization. I put together the instrument, put together the online questionnaire, and administered it online. So everything you saw, everything I've spoken about was done right in the heart of. So when in the heart of the pandemic, when people were watching TV, reacting to news on CNN and all that, I shut down the TV, I shut down social media, I shut down everything. And I don't want to take calls from people telling me 100 people already died in their community. I don't want to hear that. I just want to focus on what agency I have to bring about insights into what exactly is happening. I've always argued that, part of the problem why we have a lot of young people also having issues around mental health is because there is an overconsumption of social media, and there's so much out there that is not good for your mental health. So I shut down everything. TV, I shut it down. I don't want to. I will watch news sparingly, I will read, but breaking news, and 10 people died in New York. Oh, breaking news, and the hospitals in Johannesburg. I know it's there, but I don't want to over-consume that. So, Unduduzo, everything I've shared with you was done generically. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we've got another question from Sam, who's asking if we expect to kind of have the pandemic end and then go back to old ways of being and doing, or do we accept a new normal? So what's your take on that?
Okay, my take is neither of the two. My take is that we are faced with a future of uncertainties, and we should think very carefully about what we do now, and rather be prepared with knowledge should we face this kind of a global situation. Thank you.
Thanks again. So it looks like mental health has stood out for a lot of people as one of the findings or key insights that your research has shown us. And Talita's asking if you could say more about the mental health vulnerability, particularly of this 18 to 24-year-old cohort. So is this an issue that goes beyond their age and development stage, or what other factors has your research identified that makes that particular group vulnerable? So is it that particular age, or are there other factors that come into play?
Yeah, thanks, Mikateko. That age group are digital natives. And because they are digital natives, they tend to spend more time on TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat. As I said, it matters how much time you spend on social media. And I don't deny the realities happening. I also have to manage my own mental health, especially to be a researcher that does quality research. And I still do daily. I'll give an example. Oh, there's one of my family members. Hey, Manuel, hey, you don't understand. This is happening now. This is da, 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 da. So I called this family member up and said, you need to stop sending me these things. And if you don't stop, I will block you. They said, but you are living in denial. I said, no, I'm not living in denial. Bad things happen everywhere, not only in the US or in South Africa. It happened in Italy, it happened in Europe, it's happening everywhere. But I also want to manage how much of that I consume on a daily basis. I would rather read an article or two, read a book. And even if I'm not interested in reading it, let me rather sleep. After all, I don't get enough of it. So I would rather go and sleep. So for that age group, I think it's because they are digital natives and they seek attention, And I think that is the reason why we have that in that group. So is this an issue beyond their age group, or what other factors? The reality, and I must be sincere with you, is that there are so much we don't know, and I want to be very careful to make claims that maybe we know everything. One thing you have to understand is that we are still researching. There's a lot. As I speak with you, we've developed 3 new instruments on mental health that we have added to the initial instrument that was administered in May 2020. So because of the data set we've been able to get from the different collaborators in the different institutions, and because of the prominence of mental health coming up across all the institutions, we have 3 new instruments on mental health to dig deeper and to make sense of exactly the different layers of understanding of exactly what is happening. So currently we're researching more. As I said, we're still at it, and I'm really very excited with the data. We have another interview. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ojo and Mika. We have, just to remind you, that we have under 10 minutes to go, and I think we have 3 questions. So as the questions are being read and the responses should be done, bearing in mind that I think we have about 8 minutes left.
All right, so I'm just going to go through the last 3 questions, and perhaps I'll just read them out to you, and then you can decide which ones you want to which ones you want to answer and in what order. So there's a question from Day who says, looking at the impact of the pandemic on higher education so far, what are your thoughts on whether this reflects any inadequacies on the part of education institutions or policymakers on the creation of education systems that are able to flourish amid unforeseen circumstances? So I think that also has to do with, are we creating education systems that are agile, that are able to kind of adapt and respond to challenges as they come up? The next question is from Zanele, who says, you mentioned that the education we offer students currently would require a relook to bring students closer to where changes are taking place. Do you think there's a need for increased scope for work-integrated learning or workplace-based learning programs? And then the final question is from Chimwemwe, who says, one of your topic labels of your research is on internet connection or load shedding record, a occurrence of 0.37. So how do you fuse technology and impactful learning education to get to disadvantaged students? So that's questions around infrastructure and accessibility of technology and the internet to students who are in positions of disadvantage, which would make access to these technologies less feasible. So those are the three last questions, and it's up to you how you respond to them. We've got about 5 minutes left.
Yeah, I will answer the three in 5 minutes. So for the first question around the inadequacies of the institutions, it's not about that. Nobody is well prepared for a pandemic. When a pandemic is a pandemic, it's a global situation. You are never prepared for a pandemic. And when it happens, it happens. So it's not about the inadequacies of the institutions. A pandemic happened. That's exactly the reality. A pandemic happened. So when a pandemic happens, there's nothing we can do. You know, a pandemic happens. So yes, universities are learning to do things differently now. And of course, we'll continue to evolve. Like all of us have learned quite a lot now as compared to when this started. So that is my response to that. Yeah, in terms of Zanene's question around us relooking education around work-based learning, I would say is a yes. But it's more than that. We need to also think about the curriculum we teach in the universities. How compatible with the 21st century realities are these curriculum? Because it's important for us to understand that it's never going to be business as usual. Either we accept it or not, it's never going to be business as usual. And our universities must look at things very differently going forward. And that is exactly what we just have to do. So that is that. And in terms of labels, load shedding, internet, and all that. To be sincere with you, even even countries who have a better internet penetration than us, especially in the global north, some of them even struggled. I won't mention countries. There are some countries, because during the same time the pandemic was happening and I was doing this research, I was in another global collaborations across 6 time zones, including with colleagues in Australia, in Singapore, in Mauritius, in the UK and in the US. And some of them also struggle with internet connectivity because suddenly the extent of demand on the global infrastructure became very huge. Yes, we have our own local challenges around load shedding and around all kinds of, but to be sincere with you, what I'm telling you now, you might not believe it. We are way above some countries, even in the global north, in terms of internet connection and accessibility. So, and things will continue to improve. And I would rather say, let's look at the cup as half full than half empty. I think there is another question. I hope you might be around this afternoon. Okay, there's a present. Okay, Fenella is actually asking Zanele to attend a presentation, and I think I saw that presentation, which will be on work-based learning. Yes. Yeah, I think that would be a good one. I'm also looking forward to that presentation. Part of this will be, okay, yeah, I've seen that. So, did I make it, Mikateko?
Yes, I think you did.
Tried. Good.
I think so. Tiffany will let us know.
Well done. Well done, Dr. Ojo, and well done, Mikateko. You're brilliant and spot on in terms of timekeeping. And so we've come to the end of our first session, and it went on brilliantly. I'm sure everyone would agree. And so we are going to have a 15-minute break, and we're resuming at 10:45. And I would urge you to be punctual, because there are others that are joining from elsewhere. And so if we start at the same time, it will make sense. So we're using the same link, and we start over in the next 15 minutes. So you can either mute yourself and or leave, then rejoin. But then I think, yeah, whichever way suits you. But it was nice having you. Thanks so much, Dr. Ojo, for the presentation. Thanks, Mika, for being a brilliant discussant. And thank you to all the participants, all those that took part in asking questions and just listening. It was nice chairing the session. See you at 10:45.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Banda. And thanks so very much. Is this Dr. Matebula, right? Mikateko?
Yes.
Okay, brilliant. So thank you, Doctors Matebula and Banda, for the invite, and again to Professor Walker for the opportunity to speak to your group. I will do this again and again, and I'm happy to support the wonderful work that is happening there. Thank you, and I look forward to the next. I will be in the next presentation. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.